So hi everyone, just want to welcome you to our Flywheel Fuel series. My name is Alexis Eaglin and I'm a HubSpot certified trainer here on the Simple Strat team, here to welcome you. In this Flywheel Fuel series, is essentially designed to help you build awareness, generate leads, and create the fuel that you need to really power your marketing, sales, and service goals. We do these every month, typically on Wednesdays, but we made an exception this week. So be sure to stay connected with me, Allie, and Simple Strat, so you never miss out on our future sessions. So today we are diving into case studies and everything to drive more conversions for those. So we'll be going over things like your must-haves that you should have in every case study, the different types of case studies, common mistakes, and just overall our top recommendations for what you should be doing. Just some general housekeeping for you. So always feel free to ask questions. Just drop them in that Q&A section, and I'll be monitoring those to get those answered either in real time or we'll answer them all at the end. Everything here is going to be recorded, and we will send the slides as well as a playbook that will be kind of accompanying this with you. And then also just make sure that some of the things we might talk about require specific paid tools or specific levels of HubSpot. So again, if you have questions about that, just be sure to drop them and I will let you know. And if this is your first time joining in, we are a Diamond partner for HubSpot. So we are here really to kind of just lend you our expertise and be able to help you guys with all things related to either purchasing or upgrading HubSpot, things with strategy and implementation, fixing messy portals, building case studies, and lots of just like monthly support as well to make sure that you guys are continuously growing and using HubSpot to the best of your ability. So feel free to always check us out, simpleshot.com/consult. But that is all for me. I'm going to pass things over to our host, Allie Schwanke, and she will get us going.
Sounds good. Well, thanks, Alexis, for that. And everybody, we are going to dive into case study marketing today. So to bring us back to who we are and why this matters, one of the things that we find is people have a lot of assets or case studies in their library, and they'll say, hey, how do I use these to nurture people? Or they will ask, if we do nurturing, what do you need from me? And we'll say a case study would be a good example. So whether you're on the backside of that, where you've got some case studies and you want to put those into practice in HubSpot, we'll get to that toward the end of the webinar. Otherwise, we'll start the first part of this webinar talking about what is a good case study? How does it actually lead to better conversions? And then how do you think about this when you're creating this with your team as kind of a continual thing that fills your marketing hopper? So what is a case study? I like to make sure and have everybody's shared understanding of this. So when we say case study, we all know what we're talking about. There are 4 different types we're going to go through so that we can kind of define that further. But generally speaking, a case study is, evidently my bullets are wrong. So we're going to go in reverse order here for us to get back down to. Let's start at the top where I was going to start. And so they're valuable pieces of sales enablement collateral. They're helping a prospective customer understand the value. And the goal is compelling action for them to move forward. And usually the reason they're not moving forward is due to some unknown circumstances or trust. Really, there's like a lack of trust that you can actually solve their problem. So I like to call case studies regret insurance. And the reason I say that is because when we make a purchasing choice, we're putting our trust in the idea of like, that is going to solve my problem. Now, I don't know about you guys, but how many times have you bought something, whether it is a service or maybe a product, and immediately you go to put it to work and you're like, this is not what I expected at all. And so how do you help overcome that feeling of buyer's remorse? Well, there's a lot of things to do on the backside, but one of them on the pre-sale side is going to be a case study, again, regret insurance. So these case studies should help your reader or prospective customer, or if you're using a video case study, which we'll talk about, it's important that they visualize themselves as the hero of the story. So case studies are not actually about you. So if you're creating case studies as a company, your case study should not be about you. It should be about the customer, their experience, and you just happen to be the conduit for that to happen. So that mindset is very, very important as we're thinking about the right way to use case studies. The other thing is they should relate to the problems of the featured customer. So, or client in this case. If you haven't created a buyer persona or even a table of the type of people that you work with and their common problems, or even like talk to your sales team and get the most common objections, those are going to be ripe ingredients for you to create case studies that map back to the things you're hearing in the buying process. So I'll give you an example. Tyler on our team leads a lot of our sales conversations, and he'll often hear, why should I go with this instead of this? Well, in the case of why should I move from Salesforce to HubSpot, we actually have a case study that answers that very question. And it tells the story of a company that had done that, what their hesitations were, how they overcome them. So it becomes a very valid piece of content to aid in a conversation after the sales call is over. So clients and customers can see themselves achieving their own goals by using your product or service. So why aren't we doing this more? Well, I'll say number one, like we've done a lot of case studies over the years, and I've worked with a lot of people, not just at Simple Strat, but in other roles that I've led. And it's a lot of times difficult to get customer permission to do a case study. So this definitely comes up as an obstacle. And I will say one of the reasons it comes up as an obstacle is because if I were to contact Alexis and say, hey, Alexis, we want to do a case study with you. Alexis is forced to define that however Alexis defines that. So step number one to getting customer permission is usually have a process on the front end so you can be clear and focused in your ask and tell the customer what to expect when they say yes to the case study. So how much time is it going to take? Do I need to get approval from my boss? What are you going to feature? Do I get a chance to proof it? All those things, again, that's like scary unknown. The more you can be clear in the knowns, you're still going to get no's, but there are some ways around this. So I'll go through that here as we talk about it today. It is often hard to tell a story that quantifies value. I know when I've been creating case studies for clients over the years, have been in situations where we do the case study interview, and quite frankly, we get to the part where we're writing the case study, and there really isn't a hook. Like there really isn't anything there. It's just kind of been like this happened. So you don't want to have a this happened happen to you, because then you end up with a just kind of a thing that doesn't really have any value. So I have a couple of things that I'm going to suggest here to help you avoid that situation. Time and resources. If you're going to commit to creating case studies, I would encourage you to commit to a timeline. We're going to create one a month, one a quarter, but then you can, like, if it doesn't have a timeline and it doesn't have an owner, when nobody owns it and it has no timeline, it does not get done. So time and resources, if you have templates, that makes it easier to think of. So you'll get some examples in today's webinar here. Sharing sensitive information is certainly one of those challenges, especially if you happen to be in like SaaS software and you want to share, let's say, a screenshot of someone's dashboard. Okay, if it's real data, you're gonna have a hard time getting approval for that. You might have to anonymize the data. You may have to make generic like goal assumptions. So instead of we increased our leads by, from 50 to whatever, you're gonna have to use percentages. Be careful with percentages, because nobody trusts anybody when they say they had 1,000% increase, because we just assume the numbers were terrible in the first place and you just did a little bit better. Like we all know that game. So believability, we're gonna talk about believability being one of the most important things that we go through here. The last thing is, I think as I'm thinking about when we review these from an editing standpoint, case studies as a company, like I would love it if I could say, yeah, client portal super messy, giant dumpster fire, blah, blah, blah. And here's how clean it is on the backside. Okay, think about that for a minute though. A client doesn't want to look bad, and the customer doesn't want to look bad. Like, wow, how terrible was your sales team before you got sales training? Ooh. Let's not do that. So we have to figure out how to tell the story in a way that the client was open for improvement. They were looking for changes. They had a couple of things that were holding them back. Like that language is going to be very important. And as you review that, we have to think, okay, how does the client become proud to share this, proud that they partnered with us, and not like, oh, wow, clearly, you were our savior and we were terrible before. So elements of a good case study. So I have an example on the right. We'll go through the different types, but the key elements of the case studies are going to include a company overview. So just who is the company? What do they do? Just so the person who's reading the case study can have context. And oftentimes, if there is a company you're working with, if they have an overview statement they want you to use, ask for that, because otherwise, I've found if we go to people's LinkedIn profiles and we'll copy it and paste it into a case study, and I've had situations where they're like, wow, where did that paragraph come from? And we're like, we just copied it from your LinkedIn page. So maybe double check that today. It might be a thing you need to update, but that is a place to start. You definitely have to define the challenge and the problem. So in this example on the right, we've got a problem, and we've got kind of some bullet points of the problem. And as you can see on the right, this is the real case study of ours, but the problems and solutions, like we've created it so your eyes can like quickly take in the information due to the headings, the bullets, the subheads, the styling. So that's going to be very important. What was the solution? So these are really like how you helped and what actions you took. So even if it's a very small action, like break it into 3 steps, for example. What were the results? And results mean you have to have a goal in the first place. So I think as I'm spending more time talking to folks on the front end of their case study process, you have to think about your service delivery. So you're gathering those metrics and almost like you have to document like where we are today before you want to write a case study. So if we get brought in to write a case study and we end up on the backside of that and you're like, well, what did they want to accomplish? And you kind of got to make up the goals. That's not a fun place to be. Visuals or data, especially if you can show that numbers have moved, that's really important for business impacts. Client testimonials, if you can incorporate those as well. And then there's a conclusion. So these are really like, if we're looking at the recipe for a good case study, these are your 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 ingredients. So the 7 ingredients. Now, here's another way to look at it. I love my visuals, so I love thinking about like the way that this would progress through the life of a client experience. So there's life before, there's the initial metrics, there's what they'd tried before. This is a really important piece to include in the story, and actually something really important for your sales team to know as well. I will say that one of the things that we see when we create our case studies that we're starting to pull out more in our design of case studies is clients had worked with another agency to do X, and because of the way that that agency functioned, they did not get a good result. And so they're coming to us because we have a different methodology. So it's like, how do we contain a lot of case studies who have or design case studies that prove that we have, hey, we take a lot of clients as like the second place that people go when they've screwed it up the first time. The solution is definitely going to be a piece of that, and then life after. So really we're looking for the delta between initial metrics and then difference in metrics. So the reason I bring this up as like the 2 places that you have to live goes back to what I just mentioned 2 minutes ago. And that is metrics need to be built into your onboarding process and your new client acquisition process. So if you don't do that, it's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to reverse engineer pulling those metrics out to tell the business impact. So these don't always have to be revenue. And I know it's really hard to quantify some stuff like, oh, I save more time. But there are creative ways to do this, but you do have to think about the entire experience. And if you're struggling with this, like, feel free to drop a comment. We could probably ideate a little bit on that, but these 2 pieces are really what will tell the business impact, and they need to be built into your process, because a case study writer can't necessarily fix this for you if it's not actually like before and after documented internally. So how long should a case study be? Well, it's kind of like how long should a video be? And quite honestly, it's short enough to consume quickly, but long enough to tell the story. So how's that for vague? But really, most experts would agree that 1 to 3 pages. When you get longer than 3 pages, the mental load of just opening up a document and seeing that it's 5 pages long, like the minute that we open up something, we're like, whoa, no time. Like regardless of how easy it is to consume, that's what we think of. So if you go a little bit longer, like if you go beyond 2 pages, you do need to structure it so you have an executive summary at the front. So if they only read the first page, it's kind of like how people read proposals. They're like flip, 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 investment page, pricing. Like everybody just wants kind of the brass tacks of like what that is. So that's about how long. And remember, skimming is reading. So the most important information needs to jump off the page. As you're coming up with your template, I would highly recommend you use a template. And I don't mean go to Canva, find a template. I mean, establish what you want that structure to look like with your designers so that you know how many words you have as you continue to write more case studies. Because the best way to get that out, when I go back to that time and resources piece, is knowing that like every single time you put an overview, it's going to be 4 to 5 lines. Great, I know I don't have 3 paragraphs. Okay, so it just makes it easier to pull that together. So the 4 types of case studies, this is our personal belief. So if you go online and say how many types of case studies there are, maybe you won't find 4. I believe there's 4. First one is the testimonial video. So this goes off-road from the original like key elements that I shared. And the reason I share this is you need some sort of social proof. If you cannot get to the point right now where you can write true case studies, a testimonial video is a good placeholder. So especially these days, capturing it via Zoom and stitching it together in a story is really effective. And especially if you can keep it as like short and to the point as possible. But a lot of times when you're using these testimonial videos, the client will say things that you could never put in writing. Like you can hear their emotion and you can hear like how the story kind of came together. So I would certainly lean into that. So I do have an example here in this next slide of a testimonial video for an executive coach. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I'm just going to show you like how it came together for the first 30 seconds, just so you get like a little bit of an understanding of what I mean here. Let's make sure this is turned up all the way as well.
John is, he's more than a coach. I'm just amazed constantly at his energy level and the challenges that he's overcome and just how he keeps going. And that's what I was looking for in a coach or somebody older that was going to kind of go through the same stage of life I was about ready to enter. My name's Jim Hunt. I'm born and raised right here in Lincoln, Nebraska.
So again, not rocket science, but I think the thing to keep in mind is that like when you're interviewing someone, you're looking for them to say the thing that if no one watched the rest of that video, the first 30 seconds is like, this is what I was looking for in a coach, and I am like super, super pleased by it. And so if you're looking for someone, like in this case, like John is older than this business owner, and John happens to be an older, wiser mentor, which is what Jim wanted in an executive coach. So if that's you, great. If it's not going to connect with you and you're not going to keep watching. So you have to think about all the decision places or all the things that are important to the clients and customers you're trying to bring on. And then when you're shooting testimonial videos, that needs to be something you bring to the front. Too often I see testimonial videos that are like, hi, I'm Allie and I run this company and I do all these things. And we sort of started doing whatever, boom, you've lost me. Okay. So you got to bring that hook toward the front. And again, this was shot like clearly he's in his office. There's a recycle container in the background. There was no staging involved. And you can see the screen is reflecting off his glasses. So you might argue not as professional as you'd like, but actually this is very, very effective.
John is
okay. And I don't know how to go to the next slide, evidently. How do I do this? Here we go. Okay. Technical difficulties. All right. So the second type of case study is what we would call a project profile. And the project profile, these are sort of, I'm sharing these as levels of ease in creation. So with the testimonial video, you can set the questions you want and then, hire the videographer, whatever you want to do with that there, and then just make sure you craft the story as it shakes out. With the project profile, you're merely mentioning what you did and you're kind of giving a social proof example of we've worked on a project like this. And so you may or may not have the client testimonial part of this. You may or may not mention the company. Like you may actually just say company and industry XYZ and location California. This makes it possible for you to maybe churn out some more social proof type of like, we have done this work, because a lot of times, especially in professional services, if that happens to be the type of firm that you have, you end up in these situations where someone's like, have you ever done X? And if you just answer it on the call, they're like, okay. But if you send a project profile, that can often tell the story to additional buying committees or people that might be validating that who are not on the call. So, and then, people forget things on calls. So if you're up against another competitor and you have a project profile and they don't, like, then that's obviously going to help you as well. So here's an example of that. We have these here that we're building out at Simple Strat, but this is a project profile for the event registration with additional guest capture in HubSpot. So here's who they were, here's what they wanted to do, here's what we did, here's a couple of screenshots. I mean, literally one page. But if Tyler, again, on our sales conversations, is working with a client who does a lot of events and they deal with, some complications there, it's like, actually, we have a couple of things we've done to, like, in this case, they wanted to make it possible if you register for an event, then you could also add a guest and that guest also gets registered. So if you're familiar with HubSpot, you end up being like in this situation where you've got a form, but then you can't add someone to the form like you can in a meeting. So we had to create a special field that then populates a workflow, that then populates a contact, blah, blah, blah. Like awesome. But in the end, what they wanted was this situation. So this project profile is how that shook out. Now, the third type of case study is going to be what we call the case story. And I've loved talking about the differences between the case story and the case study, because a study is just like that. It's got data. With a case story, you have typically a good experience, but it's difficult to figure out the exact business impact. So the story is usually, here's what was happening, here's what we did, and the client, says you're great people. Okay, if that's the case, that's good, but you might not be able to quantify the impact, or you're just really wanting to tell what it was like to work with you, which is still fine. In this case, this is an example from a company that they did a lot of culture, organizational development. And so they were talking about moving a culture or moving a team culture beyond the status quo. So here's who they were, here's what their situation was. Still some of the same elements you see in a case study, but really they just said, like, in this part, it's like, here's the program we built. Okay, great. We have no idea on like, what was the business impact of this? How many dollars did they save? Like that stuff wasn't quantifiable on the type of way that this company approached business. But this is still a really good case story that talked about, here's what they were and here's how we approached it. So So you could maybe trust that they would do the similar thing with you if you hired their company to consult on this endeavor. So the first type of case study is one we're talking about so far, which is the case study. So this one has true business impact. It's driven by life before and life after, and there is a measurable ROI or many measurable ROIs. So again, the case study that I showed previously was one that we designed. This is another similar one where a property technology company had fixed their HubSpot and increased adoption and streamlined sales. So a couple of metrics we had there were increase in duplicate or decrease in duplicate contacts. That's a sign of a messy portal is when you've got duplicate contacts. Another thing is deals that sit in a stage for too long. So some of those things were implemented. Again, we've got quotes, and then we've got the actual marketing contacts that lended some insight here as well. So this one, evidently I needed to say this twice. So we're going to say, how long is it again? I must have wanted to say something else on this slide. So we're going to buzz by this. All right, what makes them convert? All right, this is probably the question of the day, because how you write a case study, even if you have all the elements that I just shared before, there's really three big things that make a case study really convert in the sales process. So the first one is going to be the specificity of the pain or the problem. So if Alexis is talking to me about something relative to her HubSpot portal, and the specificity of her problem was, let's say that she's working in a consulting firm, and they need to be able to track referrals, and their inability to track referrals means they can't get marketing investment the way they need to. I've got a case study about tracking marketing investment relative to referrals and pro service. All of that makes sense. Specificity of pain or problem. That also nods to the specificity of industry. Even though a lot of problems across business is very, they're very similar. In working in marketing and sales from all of my career, I have come to believe that everyone believes they're a unicorn. So if they can understand that, no one gets real estate, Allie. I got to find a case study in real estate. Have you worked in real estate? No? Okay, I'm sorry. So specificity of industry is very important. And then the last one, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but believability and business impact is huge. So when I see numbers like, 500% and 2000% and stuff that you're just like, no one does that. I mean, it's just no one does that. So business impact is going to be huge, but the believability of that impact is going to be even greater. So when the things that my radar goes up for now, so if a technology company claims that they doubled close rate in 14 days, okay, I don't think it takes a lot longer to solve that problem. So I'd be like, I don't know about that. So definitely get some perspective from, if you're too close to it, get some outside perspective to make sure that that believability factor is there. Now, this is where we're going to put the case studies into practice inside of HubSpot. So we're going to spell this out a little bit farther in our in the playbook that you'll get as a copy toward the end of this week when the recording comes out. But first, what we're going to do is talk about the next webinar. So if you happen to be on our webinar email list, you probably got notified about this, but we're going to be talking about the updates that came out in June, and we're going to talk about what that means for you if you're a HubSpot user. If you're not a HubSpot user, you probably aren't going to be interested in this webinar, but we do have another Flywheel Fuel series coming out soon, which we'll have posted on this very page, simplestrat.com/webinars. So definitely check that out. So let's talk about when case studies should be used and how to be most effective with putting them into place. So moving from status quo, and status quo is really that things are okay, my, things might be a little painful, but I'm not ready to go to the ER yet. And so you need help moving that person from the status quo, or the infamous, what we call the do nothing decision, and moving them to take that next step. Oftentimes here, nobody wants to be the first person to take a risk. We all like the idea of being the first person to get the iPhone. We don't like the idea of being the first person to test out a roller coaster. So because of that, thinking about business decisions that have real impact, we often don't want to be the first person to test the roller coaster in our business when we're trying to bring in a new vendor. It could cost us our job. It could cost us a lot of backlash from our boss, whatever. So case studies, again, provide that regret insurance to help them move forward from the do nothing situation. They're also really effective when you're deciding between, or when a prospect is deciding between your company and a competitor. So let's all assume that competitors have case studies, but I will say that especially in professional services, but and in smaller companies too, most of the competition's case studies they're not there, or they're not as abundant as they should be. So they might have a couple case studies, but as I mentioned in the previous slide about like when they're most effective, they don't have a ton of linkage to specific pains. They don't have a lot of linkage to industries. So I think one of the things before you talk about putting HubSpot or putting case studies into HubSpot today, one of the first things I would have you do is go back and look at all the objections you have in your sales process, all of those, like I call them back of mind questions that your customers have. What are the questions they have in their mind that they're not verbalizing to you? And do you have some sort of relevant case study or situation or project profile that would help address that? Because what the best case scenario is every single call, and this is how simple strat, like we see our content too, is every single call I have with someone, I want to be able to send them a something that helps continue to keep us in conversation, even better if they can continually trust that we can solve their problems. So definitely deciding between you and a competitor. The other thing here is, this is maybe just a little sales tip. If you're in sales and you're not asking how someone's making the decision, you need to ask that. You need to bring that into your sales conversation. Hey, are you looking at any other solutions? Tell me how else you're solving this problem. And we're not asking to try and understand who all the competitors are. You're really asking to understand what their buying process looks like. And definitely, if you're finding yourself up against more competition than before, you probably need to look at your case study strategy really strategically. This also is important when you have a buying committee, when multiple parties are involved in a buying decision. So I've ever had this happen to you. I know I've had it happen to me where I'm on a call, the call was really great. And then that person goes back to whatever behind the door situation's going on back at work. And all of a sudden it's like, we decided that we're just going to put this on hold, or we decided to go somewhere else. And you're like, what the, like, we had such a great call. Well, selling to buying committees, there's a whole methodology around that. But one of the things that will help you in that situation is a case study. So if you do sell to buying committees, there's research that shows that their buying committees went from 3 to 5 people, and now we're up to 9 people. So yay, congratulations, all sales and marketers. We have that many more personalities to try and appease in our process. That's why case studies are also going to be important. All right, so what are the plays that we can run in HubSpot when it comes to putting these into practice? So we've got 10 plays that we talk to our clients about, and we help set up for people when they've got case studies to make them, essentially give them more mileage, but also put them at the right spots that it would make sense to automate or direct to your prospects based on where they are. So 10 plays, I also didn't know how to do 5 on one slide and 5 on the next and keep them numbered. So we're just going to go 1 through 5 and 1 through 5 part 2. So 1 through 5 part 1. So number 1 is a template. And so HubSpot has templates in their sales area. And actually now they're going to be found in the navigation on the left-hand side under library templates. But a template is just what it sounds like. You've got a template that says, in this case, I'd encourage you to think about something, and we'll have an example, or we do have an example in this playbook. That's, let's say the subject line is, how company XYZ stops deal leakage or something to that effect. Like they're losing things in their deals. And then the template would be, you find it frustrating when this happens, learn how this company overcame this. Or it might be a template that you simply just pop in when you need to check in with a prospect and they haven't talked to you for a while. And so you're going to say, hey, it's been a while. I wanted to share this recent case study with you. Again, that copywriting is going to vary based on who you're talking to, but think about the templates as a marketing team. If that's your role, how can I give my sales team templates in HubSpot that I can easily deploy case studies out to our prospects? Number 2, automated emails based on lifecycle stage of opportunity. This is one where you do need to have specificity and relevance all really kind of shook out in your data strategy. But if you have that, then let's say an opportunity is aging X number of days. So let's say an opportunity has been in the funnel for 30 days or more. Let's go ahead and enroll them into a case study drip so that they can see social proof of what's been happening with our clients while they kind of sit on this decision. Again, this varies based on your sales cycle and all of that, but that's one option. Or they're an opportunity and they happen to visit a page on your site that's very specific to their pain, or they visit a very specific blog, and then you want to drop a case study. I know for like myself, I've seen this exhibited on me when I go to buy specific software as well. So I know that it works, and it's something that, again, you need a little bit of strategy there with your data stuff. We can help you with that, but this would be a really good thing to consider. Number 3, this is available to all marketing pro, like whether or not you're using LinkedIn ads. LinkedIn inside of HubSpot now supports the ability to share documents. So if you had that 3-page PDF, you can upload that inside of HubSpot as a file, go to your social scheduling, pick your LinkedIn profile that you want to post to, company or personal page, and then you can actually schedule posts with those documents. So in the interest of creating distribution that's easy, once you create a case study, have your marketing team just go in and make sure it gets promoted on social once a month for the next 12 months. Like, get it off your plate, get it in there, make sure that it's got some visibility, and then you can kind of like treat that as a piece of evergreen, and just, you're getting the most out of HubSpot there. Number 4, add it to sales documents in HubSpot. So that means like there is a documents area inside of the hub. I believe it's not open in front of me, Alexis. I think it's also in the library. It's documents in the library on the left-hand side. Okay. New HubSpot navigation, keeping me on my toes. So it's in the library, and when you add it to documents, when you include those documents in templates, number 1 up here, or when you include them as links in your sales emails, you end up being able to track who's interacting with those. So the good news there is by using case studies as documents in HubSpot, you can ensure consistency of sharing that resource among your sales team and aggregate that data. If you don't, here's what typically happens. Hey, everybody, we have a new case study. Sales team all downloads it to their own personal computers. They all call it different things. It winds up with 7 different versions, and suddenly we have collateral out of control. So this is a good mechanism to use inside of HubSpot to make that possible, to keep that consistency and aggregate that data. Number 5, create a CTA. So we do have a different, we have a video over on YouTube about how to do CTAs in HubSpot, but calls to action are going to be these very specific embedded things inside of our HubSpot blogs and HubSpot pages that we can use to call out action. You can track conversions on that. But if you had a blog post, so let's say, I'm going to go back to that example about the messy HubSpot portal case study. So if we have a blog post, it's called the 17 signs your HubSpot is broken and how to fix it. If we embedded that, hey, learn how one company took action to fix a lot of these things, go read this case study. That would be how to use a CTA inside of content that we already have to promote this piece of content. And again, CTAs are a very HubSpot specific feature. So this is technically number 6, post form submission nurture based on which best describes you. So I love when we're using forms. I mean, there's so much flexibility with forms. You can add all sorts of questions, but if you keep your forms short, you typically get a higher submission rate unless you're really qualifying them for a high ticket opportunity, like in time for your sales team. But if you have a drop down that says which best describes you, and the description are problems, think about things like, I'm going to use my HubSpot example, which best describes you. I'm new to HubSpot and really just trying to get started. I took over a messy portal. I am a leader considering buying HubSpot. Again, I'm making these up on the fly, but if you have questions like that, based on how someone answers that question, those are problem statements that could most likely correlate to a case study. So again, post form submission, thank you for whatever. And then the next day they might get an email. Hey, we thought you might be interested in this. And the interest should correlate well based on their self-professed drop-down selection. Okay, so evidently I had an example in here that was better than one I just made up just now. So if budget's the issue, again, this would be an example of having a case study. And think about your title, everybody. Titles are very important. If the title of the case study is small budget makes big impact, that would be like, okay, great. That talks specifically if I say budget is my issue or my problem at the moment. That may or may not be the way you go to market, but again, that's another example. Okay, what are we on, number 6? Trigger an automated email based on a lead score. The lead scoring function just got a lot of updates, and so I can't speak too much to this because I know the HubSpot specialists on our team are spending a lot more time in it right now than I have. But triggering automated email based on lead score is still something you can consider, however your lead score shakes out. Embedding them on your HubSpot website. This is only true of HubSpot websites, not everybody else's websites, but if you use HubSpot CMS, or now known as Content Hub, you can embed smart content. So if someone's at a specific place in their journey and they've been cookied and they're in your HubSpot database, you could choose to show this on a page, whereas everyone else who is not at that stage would not see it. So again, a great way to make that content somewhat interactive and reflective of where that person is on their buying journey. You can create a saved section to use in marketing emails. So if you happen to be putting together a lot of marketing emails, newsletters, that kind of stuff, you can create a saved section. So you would just put, like, let's say you're going to put the case study on the left, the short description, and the call to action button. You save that section, heart it, and then down at the lower left-hand side of that marketing email, you have saved sections. So what that makes possible is any marketing person or marketing team member, if they're creating an email where you want to include a case study, they can just drag and drop that in. If you're using the drag and drop editor, makes it easy, makes it consistent with your brand, and again, like, saves a lot of time. We do have a video over on YouTube about saved sections in emails. So if you're curious about that, go check that out. And then the last one, this one's pretty common, but I would say this one is probably the heaviest, maybe not the heaviest lift. I think probably the triggers and workflows are heavier lifts. But this one, you want to create a gated content play. So if the case study is being used for demand generation, you put it behind a landing page with a form. They get to a thank you page, they get the, the resource and the email follow-up. So all of this can be something you consider. Number 5 is very popular. We do this for a lot of clients to set that up, but again, something else that you can consider here. So again, as I mentioned before, we have this, like all of these 10 plays that we have are in a playbook that you'll get. It's a PDF. We've got examples of these things in that playbook, so you'll be able to reference that. And if you need help in the meantime, if you want to put some of these plays in, feel free to reach out and chat with us, because again, we do this for clients all the time. And if we can take it off your plate, we'd love to help you move faster. So with that, we'll move into questions and answers. And if you want to book a free call, again, we mentioned that before, you can see it all over our website, but we'd love to help. So Alexis, we'll dump it back to you.